I'm gonna be honest and say that I don't exactly know what I plan to read this week, but I do know that it will be a week filled with reading. So I promise you that you'll at least get that in this vlog. I am actually not reading right now in this moment, but I plan to a little later. I'm actually trying to get my bookshelves figured out because I plan to film an unhaul, and so I have this crazy looking mess over here as I pull books off my shelf to film an unhaul with you guys, and I'm making like spaces on my shelf for books that I know are gonna be there. I'm trying to be ruthless in this unhaul because it's the end of the year. It is my last unhaul for 2021, and I have only done one unhaul this year, and it was quite a few months ago. I want to say 6 months ago. So technically I'm on a roll doing a unhaul semi-annually. So this time I'm trying to like clear as much room off my shelves as possible. Not that next year is going to be a year filled with buying books, because I actually am changing my shopping habits for next year, and I will talk about that in this unhaul that I'm filming. So make sure you guys click on that video. But yeah, I am actually on Zoom with my friends as usual. I'm gonna continue to pull some books off my shelf, and then when I get to reading, we'll check back in. So the first book I picked up was A Fate of Wrath and Flame, just because I am in the mood to get back into fantasy romance. I feel like this is like the perfect season towards the end of the year to read all the fantasy romances that I want to. This book is a little different because I bought this on a whim, and when I buy books on a whim, I normally have a really good reading experience. Like, there's just this moment when I'm in the bookstore and like I lock eyes with a book and it just pulls something in me, and then like I gravitate towards the book and I pick it up and I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna buy this on a whim. And that has been working out successfully for me all year. Every book, there's been about 3 books this year that has happened with. They were all 5-star reads, and this happened with this book too. So not to put high expectations on it, but if we look at the trends, I'm trending on a very good route. So I haven't seen this book mentioned anywhere, and I'm actually not familiar with the author. K.A. Tucker, it says, is an international best-selling author, but seeing as though I just started reading romance and she seems to be an author of romance, I have never heard of her. So this is our first time meeting, both the author and the title of this book. I have read 64 pages, but no face so far. It says on the back of the book that there's going to be some warring elven and like elemental magic, which is very different, and I'm very intrigued for that because, come on, bring some type of originality. Not really originality, but like, don't be like the other girls. All the fantasy romances that I've read, which is a very short list, I've read ACOTAR, Fortuna Sorn, Guild, and From Blood and Ash. Those are really the only fantasy romances that I have on my read list, so I'm not the most well-versed. However, this is written exceptionally better than any of the books that I just listed. Like, the writing in this book, I definitely, so like, I seen the name on this book, but I didn't really read that it was an international best-selling author. I definitely just threw it in a bag, purchased it, came home, and it's been sitting on my shelf waiting to be read. And as I'm reading this book, I'm like, this is like so good. And when you read fantasy romances, you normally like lower your expectations because, especially if they're like Kindle Unlimited books or indie authors, you don't expect them to have editors that have gone through the book and kind of made the writing more pompous and sophisticated. However, even with me having like low standards, I was blown away even more. I guess that makes any sense because of how well this book was written. And so I made a comment, and Aaron was telling me that K.A. Tucker is actually a well-known romance author of contemporary romance. And I'm like, yeah, that definitely shows in the book because I did not expect the book to be as well written as it is. And so that gravitated me towards the book even more. This has one of the best prologues in a fantasy romance that I've seen ever. And I immediately fell in love with the main character in this book. We don't open with her. Let me tell you about the book. So we open this book meeting this character named Sophie, and she is alive in the 1700s in Paris, and there seems to be this mob that's like going around burning women that they deem to be witches, and you get the sense that Sophie is the next target. And like, you open the book at this moment where Sophie's having an argument with her lover, and he's trying to convince her not to make a deal with Malachi, who is the fate of flame. And you get the sense that he's a god, and he's like, gods are vengeful, they're wrathful, and they don't give something without taking something significant. And so Sophie believes that it's actually her powers, because she's the most powerful witch, and I guess her witch abilities include flame. So him being a fate of flame, or like the god of flame, technically, I guess, would make him her god, or the god that she worships or look up to. I'm not really sure on that, but like, that's the vibe that you get. You open the book feeling so much pressure, and you feel like this tense moment of her like trying to make this tough decision, and him trying to talk her out of it. And you know that she's gonna die, and you don't know who this god is or who this Malachi is, and you're like super untrustworthy. But like, I was emotionally gripped from the beginning, because the tension and like the uncertainty came across the page. At the end of the prologue, when Sophie wakes up, you find out that she traded her powers for immortality, but when she wakes up, she still has a little bit of her witching powers. And so she's like, that's weird, why would the fate of flame leave me with my witching powers? But her lover, who's laying next to her, actually doesn't wake up. You find out that her lover was actually like, his soul was taken by the god instead of like her powers. And so she's like broken and like bewildered, because he was never a part of the deal. She was supposed to trade her powers for immortality, but now she is immortal and she has her powers, but she has lost her lover. And she's like, I'm going to beg Malachi every day to let my lover go and like free his soul from this purgatory that he's stuck in. Otherwise, he's gonna wander around mindlessly, aimlessly, because it's not a cycle that I guess he could break himself out of. He's like hanging in limbo, basically. And so you jump to chapter 1, and it's 300 years into the future, and our main character, her name is Romira, but she goes by like Romy or Rami, and she comes across Sophie, and Sophie's like this badass character, and it's super interesting to see her 300 years later, because she has been begging and praying to Malachi to let her lover go, and he's been running her on like random missions, telling her like soon enough he will release her lover or her husband. Right about the time where she's like giving up and she's just gonna kill him and her, he's like, okay, now it's time. So he sends her to hunt for this girl, and to send the girl, who is Romira. Romira's a thief in New York City, and she works for this mob, and Sophie basically kills the mob leader. It's like, yeah, you work for me now. I need you to do me a favor to help me free my husband. And so Romy doesn't know anything about this woman. She doesn't know anything about this woman's husband. She doesn't know Malachi, who is kind of described in like a demonic kind of way, or like a Lucifer kind of way, because he has like twisted horns coming out of his head, and he's like the fate or the god of flame, so you like associate him with fire. And I was just very interested in that, because again, it's not fae, it's not vampires, it's not elves or anything like that, at least not yet. But I was like, okay, like I love gods, I love a book with gods in it, and I am very interested in the twist, because apparently there's 4 fates. And so she sends Romy on like this quest to go to this place and to steal this stone. Once she gets her hands on the stone, then it'll all make sense and she'll be able to figure it out. But she's not able to give Romira any real details about why she needs to do this and who Malachi is and why he's seeking her out. So Sophie also doesn't have a lot of answers. Malachi is just the god that she worships, and she's kind of like indebted to him, and she wants to free her husband. So she's like, okay, cool, I'll send the girl to do whatever it is that you want her to do. But she doesn't have any details herself. So we're immediately like thrown into the world. And I'm raving about this book already, and that's crazy to me, because I am actually really enjoying it. It's like a compulsive read already. I'm interested to see what twist K.A. Tucker adds to her hand at fantasy romance. It says in the beginning that this is her first time trying to write a fantasy romance outside of contemporary. So far, so very, very good. I will say another thing that I really liked about Romira is that she is a reliable character, a trustworthy character. She doesn't believe anything blindly. She's tough. She asks the right questions. And I I'm so used to reading a fantasy romance where we have this main character who's super weak and, you know, super gullible and super naive, and then they have to be betrayed first, and then we have to watch them go through like this character arc before they become like this badass main character. Not that I have a problem with it, it's just fantasy romance is so flooded with that character arc, and so it was very refreshing to read from Romera's point of view, who is like, every time she's in danger, she tries to like think of a plan, think about how she's going to get herself out of this situation. She doesn't trust anyone, she doesn't ask any questions, but also she doesn't make stupid decisions. Like, she knows when her back is against the wall and she really doesn't have any choices, and so she doesn't waste fucking time going back and forth when she knows that like right now she doesn't have the upper hand. So I am already liking her for being not like other girls, and I know that's very cliche, but like, I'm happy about it. So I will come back and update you guys once I get more into the book. Y'all, my heart is beating fast. I don't know how I let this book get me so riled up, but like, I'm actually on the edge of my seat and I cannot believe this. Like, my heart is thumping. Okay, so we are 116 pages into A Fate of Wrath and Flame. And K.A. Tucker, she didn't put her foot. She didn't put her arm, her elbow. She threw her whole body into this book. It was fucking insane. It was insane. She threw her whole body into the book. She's in the book. I don't know how to even gather my thoughts. So far where I am within the first 115 pages, we have crashed into the plot of this book. So I mentioned earlier that we meet Sophie, who makes a deal with a Fate of Flame, which is one of the gods in this world, one of the 4 gods, and they're called Fates. And she is now indebted to him because he's holding her husband hostage. First of all, he comes to visit her, and she's like constantly like revering him and doing missions for him to try to free her husband, and sometimes he calls on her sexually, so she has to like offer up her body to him. That's a thing. And so she's doing ominous things in the background, and she sends Romera into this world, and we have no idea where Romera is. She has no idea where she is. Sophie is just like, do this thing for Malachi, which is the Fate, the god, and free my husband, and you don't have no choice. And then after that, she like stabs her in the chest with a horn. Turns out it's a horn that the god Malachi like shaved from his head and like reattached later. So yeah, she gets stabbed in the freaking chest, and Romera wakes up in like this old town, primitive, early 1600 country, and have no idea where she is, and it's chaotic, it's a mess. Soldiers are everywhere running up and down. There's an army hunting for her. There's this guy telling her that he needs to freaking run, and he takes a girl and like ties this magical rope to her leg and attaches it to a boulder and like throws her under the like over the water. And Romera's parents, let's back up a little bit. Romera's parents are actually still alive. Her father saw a devilish creature murder a woman, and it kind of like fractured his mind, and so he's been suffering from what they deemed to be psychotic illusions, and he's always like saying ominous things about how like demons or spirits or creatures walk among us, and he pretty much just descended into chaos, and he's a homeless man on the street. And then her mother was trying to figure out how to deal with the grief of losing her husband to like basically psychosis, and she gets caught up with this cult, and the cult is basically equivalent to like the people who burn witches at the stake, and they actually burn someone alive in front of Romera. And so Romera dips, she leaves, and she starts to live on the street as this homeless wayward kid. She finds a friend, the friend teaches her how to steal, how to pick locks, how to survive on the streets, and so that's how we get to know a little bit about Romera before we meet her as like this high class theft, before she meets Sophie. And so when she is sent into this world after being stabbed in the chest by this freaking crazy lady, she wakes up in this world, and everybody's confused, and they're like, how are you still here? We just murdered you. I literally just shot you through the heart with a freaking arrow. And like when she wakes up, she has like this arrow in her hand and it's covered with blood, and she's like, that's weird. And then later you find out that it's actually her blood in the arrow that was supposed to have killed her. So in her reality of the world that she came from, she got stabbed in the chest with a horn, but in the reality that she got sent into, I know that I'm talking fast, y'all, but y'all gotta keep up with me, but the reality that she was sent into, they also just stabbed her with an arrow. And she doesn't have any type of flesh wounds. It's just like a bruise, and like there's a pain, so she doesn't really know which reality is true. But the reality that she's sent into sounds a lot like what her father has been describing. And she's like, oh my God, I'm losing my mind like my dad did. Like, my mind is fractured. Maybe, you know, we thought that he just seen something traumatic, but maybe he didn't see something traumatic. Maybe this is hereditary. Like, maybe I'm losing it like my dad did or like my mom did. And so we're in this world. She jumps into the water. She saves this freaking girl. The girl, her brother comes, and the girl's brother ends up being the king. And they look at her, because the sister's like, oh, she saved my life. Romero saved my life. And everyone looks to say thank you. And it's like, you. Fucking you. How are you still alive? And Ramirez's like, you guys are confused. I don't know you guys. You guys don't know me. They're like, you literally just killed the king and queen, and you tried to take out the entire royal line, and your people are like storming the gates, and you've launched an entire war in our country, and you just killed my mother and father. Like, you're supposed to be dead. And Ramirez's like, I didn't kill nobody. And they're like, yes, you did. You definitely did. So they take her and they throw her in the dungeons, and she's confused because this stuff is going a mile a minute. She was at a show about to steal something from a guy, and then Sophie comes, offers her a job, murders her boss, and then she has no choice but to go with Sophie. And then Sophie starts talking about crazy stuff about saving her husband from fake a flame named Malachi, and she's like, okay, this is a little cuckoo for Cocoa Bus, but she just murdered my boss, so in order for me to make it out alive, I'll go along with it. And then Sophie stabs her in the chest. She wakes up, and everybody's like, you just murdered an entire royal family except for like the sister that she saves. So now everyone's confused now, because they're like, why would you murder the king and queen and try to take out the whole royal family and then save the sister? It doesn't make any sense. And so the sister feels bad, and she kind of tries to like sneak her out of the tower because they condemn her to death, and she's supposed to die by fire at a pyre, kind of like what they did to the witches in Salem. And so on her way out, they come across this massive creature, and she again saves the sister by putting herself on the line, and the creature bites into her, and he pretty much erupts into flame. So she wakes up 3 days later, and she's like, what happened? And they're like, you killed the creature, but you also probably could have set the creature loose because we can't trust you. And you find out that she was actually supposed to marry the king, or this version of her was supposed to marry the king, and she is actually the princess of an entire different kingdom that they've been at war with for like a long time, and their marriage to each other was arranged, and it was supposed to bring peace between the two kingdoms where they're from, where she's apparently this princess of this royal kingdom, and she's like, okay, cool, whatever keeps me alive. And so the king, or the son that is now king because she murdered his parents, is like in love with her, but he is betrayed by her, or whatever version of her just betrayed him, he hates. And so like there's this weird dynamic between them, because he can't trust her because they've been, you know, getting to know each other, they've been bunk buddies together, and all of a sudden she just tries to murder his family, and nothing she says will convince them that she is not the Romero that they think that she is. But one of the things that Sophie said before she sent her into this world is like, she said, you don't know what you are for real. You don't know who you really are. Never let them know who you are, because they will surely kill you. And Romero's like, how is letting them think that I'm a princess who just murdered the king and queen and launched an entire war in this country better than them finding out that I'm some street kid from New York who likes to steal things? I mean, I would rather just tell them that I'm a local thief. But somehow this situation is better than letting them know who she really is. So you get this feeling that Romero is definitely more. And then there is a moment in the book where Romero is faced with a mirror, and she's actually herself. They didn't change her body, they didn't change her hair or her name or her voice. She is herself, and these people think that they know her, and they think that she's this princess of this country. And so the king is like, you know what? I was gonna murder you, but you've now saved my sister twice. Both kingdoms think that you're dead. She's supposed to be the princess of Yabaris. And so the king is like, his name is Xander. He's like, you know what? Keeping you alive gives me more bargaining power than if I was to execute you. And since everybody already thinks you're dead, or your war attempt on my country has failed, no one's going to come look for you. No one's searching for you. And so now I'm going to hold you hostage until I decide to actually kill you. And then we'll go from there. So basically, you can stay alive until you piss me off enough for me to really murder you. And that was the first 100 pages of this book. It was my goodness, chef's kiss. Talk about it, like taking off into a freaking story. Like, that was it. That was the first 100 pages. I hope that it stays like that, because this is definitely going to be a new favorite for me. I am so excited to have a fantasy romance that is bringing like a new story. Like, I haven't seen anything like this in a long time, and I'm so tired of like phase. So tired of phase. And so now I don't have to deal with it. And I really like Romira, and like her having the backstory as like this street kid that has to do anything that they can to survive. Very resourceful, knowing when to be quiet, knowing when to speak up, and like when to bide their time. And like for her, it's like, okay, I don't really want to be a prisoner here, but 2 days ago you were gonna burn me at the stake. So I guess I'm making progress, maybe. We'll see. I am gonna eat some dinner. I did say that I was gonna film today, so I will go get started on that and try not to just compulsively read this book. It is the next day. Well, actually it's been 2 days, because right now it's like 12:47. I was crazy busy today. Very chaotic day. I did not realize how much energy I needed to put into registering and getting completely set up for grad school. I had a bunch of stuff that I needed to do, filmed a massive unhaul. Can't wait to show that to you guys. But yeah, I have not opened a book, read a single page today, and it's really late and I'm super tired. So I don't know. We're just gonna have to try again tomorrow, because today was not our day for reading. It is the next morning. I am out and about because it is officially the Friday before Thanksgiving. And I know that I have waited way too long to go grab anything that I may be missing for Thanksgiving. So I'm going to try to hit the grocery store and find whatever I can. So we shall see how that goes. I also filmed my unhaul yesterday, and the local half-price books by my house. Well, I have like 2 or 3 half-price books that are near me, but there's one particular location where every time I go, I completely luck up and find gems from that store. I have found so many bargains this year. I have found so many 5-star reads this year, and it is absolutely my favorite location, because every time I go after like not being there for about a month or maybe 2 months, there's always like really good additions of books there, and it's my favorite secondhand bookstore that is near me, and I want to give back what that store gives to me. I know it sounds very weird, but I appreciate everyone who goes there and sells their books that I end up seeing and like finding and having a really fun experience. And because the selection options at other locations are not as good as this one, I want to feed into that. I want to give back to that. I want to do everything I can to ensure that whoever else goes to this half price books finds a gem the way that I have. And so my unhaul, I have pulled some books that I know someone would be excited to get their hands on, maybe like a hardback copy of a very popular book, a few YA books I plan to sell to them today, and some high fantasy books I plan to sell to them today. And I'm just excited to pay it forward and give back. So the goal today is to be out grocery shopping for Thanksgiving, and then we're also going to sell some books. I will mention that I have reached 250 pages in A Fate of Wrath and Flame. It is still going really well. The dynamic between the king, who is supposed to be her fiance or like ex-betrothed or current betrothed, I don't really know how that works, and her, who is the same person but like not the same person, is so like interesting to watch, because the king literally cannot stand her. Like, she gets under his skin. So like there's some dry humor on the page where she's like, you know, you're a terrible person and you're a monster, and he's like, you literally murdered my mother and my father and brought war to my kingdom's door. And she's like, yeah, but that wasn't really me. And he's like, well, it's the same person with the same name and the same body, so you claiming that you can't remember what you did seems really convenient. We've also found out that there are elves in this book. The world that she has been sent into is like this makeup of elves and humans as well. So there's mortals and immortals, and the humans are kind of enslaved. Well, they don't like to say slaves. They like to say servants. They're kind of like in this servitude, and it's an honor to serve like elven leaders, especially if they are of the royal line. And her body may be elven, and we're not sure. So we think that she is the same person in a different world, and she may not be human, but we aren't certain. There's a lot of mystery going on, and it's very interesting to watch. But since I am out and about all day, I've decided to start the audiobook for Rise of the Empire, which is the sequel after Theft of Swords. I managed to find the audiobook on my Libby, and I actually really like the narrator, so while I'm out today, that is going to be the book that we listen to. I feel like this vlog is going to be really long, but I have not been consistent with uploading throughout this year. Senior year of college definitely whooped my butt, especially during the pandemic, and especially because I was having a baby and moving cross country. It was just a lot going on, so this is my gift to you, a very long vlog where you guys just get to spend some time with me. So I will check back in later. As I was driving past, I seen this used bookstore that had a sign in the front that said they had 500,000 books inside. And of course, me being me, I had to immediately pull over. It was so many books in there, and it really didn't seem like there was any rhyme or reason. And I am not good with shopping in environments like that, like stores where I feel like I have to completely dig through things. I don't know, I guess it was just like sensory overload for me, because the further that I went into the store, I started like breathing faster, and my heart is kind of beating fast right now. But the thought of me like having to dig through stuff, or like just attempting to like really look around and take in what I'm seeing, made me want to hyperventilate. So I had to leave. But I wish that I could have had the patience to dig through that. I don't know if there was anything good in there or not, but yeah, 500,000 books sounded like a good idea until I pulled over and went inside, and now I'm like, that was way too much. Way too much. So of course we have to wait. So I'm definitely gonna shop around while I wait. There was literally so many books in there that I wanted to purchase. Specifically, they had a lot of the hardcover, almost technically new League books by Sherilyn Kenyon, and it's a series that I've wanted to like jump into, but I just had to practice restraint. I picked up so many things and put them back down. It's crazy, but one of the books that I ended up bringing to sell was the Scythe series because I want to get them in hardbacks, and literally selling them the paperback, I found the hardback for $10, and I was just like, it is meant to be. Like, love that store. I freaking love this location. It's the best half price books I've ever been to. It is 11:30 at night. I had a very long day. I went to fix something on my bookshelves, and then I had to fix another thing because it was unbalanced, and then I needed to fix a shelf, and now I'm stuck redoing my shelves, so that's a thing. I figured since I've never done a bookshelf tour, this would be the perfect time because I've done so many changes. I've unhauled so many books. I have taken books off my shelf that I don't want to be on there anymore. There's still books that I own that will not get a place on my shelf, but I'm going for something more aesthetically pleasing in 2022. In 2020, my shelves were color coordinated, and then in 2021, which was this year, I mostly just had all the books that I own, and everything that I did on my shelf was all about maximizing space and getting as many books on there as I could. And I'm feeling like for 2022, we just want it to look pretty. And if I don't want something on my shelf, I won't put it on my shelf. I do have actual TBR carts and other places that I can put a book that won't mess up my flow that I have going on over here. So yeah, I will definitely be doing a bookshelf tour, and we'll talk about what I have on my shelves and why I put them on there. But back to updating you guys on the reading. I did not manage to read any more pages of A Wrath of Fate or Flame. Today was an audiobook day. I am 35% into Rise of the Empire. I'm having a really good time. I honestly feel like this is the perfect introduction to adult fantasy for anyone who wants to get into high epic fantasy, but you're afraid of it being very boring. For two reasons, one of which is that the writing is very digestible and the books are broken up. And so because the book may seem big, it's actually two books in one. And each separate book is about 350 pages. So as you're reading it, it comes to a climax really quickly because you're reading a short snippet of the story, but each separate work contributes to the entire story. So you get really good bite-sized pieces of this epic fantasy world that he has built. And I am still enjoying it. And I don't feel the pressure to keep up with everything because as we jump into a new story, I know that it's kind of like a new episode in like this saga that we're on. And I'm just along for the ride and I'm having a good time. I don't want to say too much because this is technically book 3 and it would just be all spoilers at this point. But I am extremely satisfied with where our characters are at this time. And I'm a little nervous about where the story's going. One thing I will say is that one main arc in this series is that we have this church that's trying to orchestrate this entire prophecy and this heir, and they want to, instead of just revering and like waiting on this heir to come, this heir of like this god, they are making their own heir so that they can control them. And like of all, and you guys know I read a lot of books that are about religion or using religion to subjugate people and manipulate people, but never has a church been churching like the church in this series. Like unmatched. They are using religion in unfathomable ways, but still very interesting. And so yeah, I'm super tired, and we'll check back in with you guys in the morning because I'm going to bed and I need to come back and fix this situation I got going on down here. Good morning. It is the next morning. My life is still chaos. I have not finished a single book so far this week, but I'm determined to fix that in my life, hopefully. The mess from last night, still here. That's still happening. So there's that. I need to get this freaking nail polish off my nails. Like, I normally don't let my nails get this chipped, but it's just been a very crazy week. So I have energy today, fully rested from yesterday. I'm gonna eat breakfast. The goal is to read all day today, and so I'm gonna do audio for Rise of the Empire, and I'm gonna clean and eat and fix my bookshelves listening to the audiobook of that. And then when I'm done, I will sit down and switch back to A Fate of Wrath and Flame and read that physically, and I will come back with updates this time. Yeah. Okay guys, so it is 5:21 in the afternoon. I finished my bookshelves over here. I'm planning to do a bookshelf tour. I'll probably film that maybe this weekend, but I finished book 3 of Rise of the Empire. Well, I finished book 1 of Rise of the Empire, which is actually book 3 in the series of the Revelations. And Michael is a genius. The way that he can just tell these short stories in like an episode of this saga, and like, I really have no words. This one was definitely more of a slower book. I don't want to say slow because stuff definitely happened. However, normally we get little snippets of like mysteries that we have earlier in the story. But for this book in particular, we're following our characters, and we have a lot of questions from the last book, and stuff is coming, or like nothing's coming out, but like stuff is happening that gives us more questions. And so you're just following the story. And then at the very end, like, I can't even put my thoughts into words right now because you can't trust anything in this book. You can't trust anyone. I'm rating the entire omnibus for each book that I actually read, but for this one, it honestly felt like a 4-star the entire time. But from that ending and like where we are left off, I honestly don't know. I'm gonna have to wait until I read book 2 and finish like the entire omnibus or this volume before I can really rate it. But I don't understand how each book is getting better than the last. It is crazy. Fun reading experience. I am enjoying these. I plan to read everything he has ever written. So there's that. Since I'm done with this book, before I even go into the next one, I honestly feel like I want to reread this. It's crazy. I don't know, guys, but I'm gonna switch back to A Wrath of Fate and Flame because I tried to do my nails and my gel lamp is broken. I don't know what happened, but there's that. So I either need to go to the nail salon or I need to order an entirely new lamp. Good morning. It is Sunday and I am determined to read the last little bit of A Fate of Wrath and Flame. I'm pretty sure I've been pronouncing the name of this book wrong this entire vlog, so you know, just ignore that. I have about 140 pages left, so it should be an easy thing to do. I know that I haven't updated you guys on what's happening in this book. So we got introductions of vampires in this book. So there are elves, but we did get introductions to vampires, which was pretty interesting. I like the way that she introduced the vampire lore. There have been mentions of fae, but that's about it. There are these ancient like creatures that I guess nobody has really seen in a very long time, and we also have mentions of sirens, but none on page. But they don't have anything to do with the particular plot of this book. But I do like the idea that she opened up more of her world and did a little world building on page, taking advantage of every moment in the book. So that's been pretty cool. While I am enjoying this book, I have to say there is really no romance in this book. And are we shocked if you ever take a recommendation from me? Like, the romance is either going to be really tragic and trauma filled, or there's going to be no romance at all. But I'm not really upset about that, because most fantasy romance novels don't have the true romance in the first book. If you think about like ACOTAR, Rhysand is not really a main character for Feyre in the first book. Fortuna Sworn is another one where the love interest is not really a thing in the first book, and also Guild is another one where the love interest isn't really a thing in the first book either. The only like fantasy romance I can think of where you meet the love interest kind of early on is in From Blood and Ash, but that's still a good 50 to 60% into the book before we get to know our love interest and they become like a thing in the book. So I'm not really upset, but I will say that like this has probably the least amount of romance. Like if you've read Guild, then this has equivalent to the same amount of romance that Guild has, which is pretty much none at all. Now, I do enjoy the dynamic between the King Xander and our main character Romeria, because K.A. Tucker goes about laying out the groundwork and like the background in this world, and she paints everyone as villainous. And so we go back and forth trying to determine who's actually the good guys, who's actually the bad guys. And at this point, I don't think that any big player in this world or in this plot are good. I don't think that anyone in this book is relatively good. I mean, even our main character is a thief. And I like the idea that we're dealing with gods who have these affinities to the four elements of the earth, and the fates or the gods in this world actually interfere with the humans, and kind of like this similarity to like Greek culture and Greek lore, because the gods are manipulative, and whenever they answer a call from one of their reverers, they always make sure to put something in there for them. So if I tried to explain like the plot of this book, it would sound really convoluted because there is so intricately woven. I mentioned earlier in the vlog that this is one of the best written fantasy romance books that I've read, and I will say that I don't know if the plot would be confusing, but it would be confusing if I tried to explain it to you for sure. There's just so many moving components in this book. There's so many different things we don't know and that we're still waiting to figure out. And the body or the person that Romeria has replaced from the person who tried to assassinate Xander, you don't know if she was doing it as like this heroic effort. You don't know if she was actually filled with hate and just trying to be vengeful. You don't know if Xander's family deserved what they received. It's just so much happening in this book, and I'm really enjoying not being able to pinpoint who exactly it is that I'm rooting for, and going through the motions with Romeria, because she's also on the fence of what's happening and like what's going on. I know that sounds very weird with no context, but in terms of morally gray characters, everyone in this book is morally gray. I don't think that there is a single character that we've come across that I would say, okay, that character is good. I'm excited to see how the last 140 pages goes. The first 115 or 120 pages was action-packed. I had so much fun with it. Then after that, for majority of the book, it was just this puzzling experience, because we have so many questions that we're trying to figure stuff out with, and court politics to play, and we were learning about the world. So it's not fast paced throughout the entire book, but there is action filled moments in the beginning, and then you have this sense of like wondering and like puzzlement for majority of the book. So minor little update, we are now on page 440. So I don't know where I was on the last update. I'm not exactly sure, but we have about 40 pages left in the book. And I will say that before I wasn't sure where the romance was going to be, but now I've discovered that it's a very slow burn romance, and there's so much like intrigue and puzzlement around it, because the old Princess Romeria murdered Xander's parents, and then we've discovered that the gods have been manipulating them, because there is this prophecy that includes both of them, and one of the gods, the other fates, instead of Malachi, bewitched him to fall in love with Princess Romeria, who died and is now being occupied, or her body's now being occupied by our Princess Romeria. So we're unsure if he's still being bewitched by Romeria, if the spell was broken when she died before her body was used as a vessel for our main character Romeria. Also, is he even in love with this version of Romeria, or are these old feelings from when Romeria and him were together before she betrayed him. Also, the old Princess Romeria was one conniving, manipulative as girl. Like, we found out so much stuff that she was doing while she was pretending to be doe-eyed and calm and like meek. She was scheming with people, she was sleeping with people, she was murdering people. The old princess, I need a prequel to this book, because so many people have a history and like moments that was like secretly like sneaky linked with the old Princess Romeria. And so our version of Romeria is like, I don't know who you guys are, but like, not only was like I this entirely different person before, no one even knows who I am. So it's not like she can piece stuff together, because everyone has had a very different relationship with the old Princess Romeria, and she doesn't know what the real version of her was, because you can pretend to be doe-eyed and meek and like a little ignorant, but then you orchestrated an entire murderous plot. So were you even pretending when you were doing that? The world building in here is so good. It is definitely the best written fantasy romance that I have ever read, and I'm excited to see what she does with this series, because there's so much, like, I have so many questions even 40 minutes from the freaking ending. And in the beginning of the book, Sophie told Romeria that she needed to go take the stone for the fate of Malachi. And I thought it was going to be like a little grab the stone, I wish on all my heart, you know, some Dragon Tales type stuff. But now we're discovering that taking the stone means a lot more than just grabbing it and wishing upon a star. It doesn't really work like that. So I am unsure as to how our characters are going to get out of this situation that they're in. And there's only 40 pages left, and it's not enough time to answer every question that I have. And so I'm definitely going to be continuing with the series. I need to know what happens. Like, I am glad that K.A. Tucker finally took that leap of faith and started writing fantasy romance, because this is what we have been missing. And like, even when we have moments where our main characters, Romeria and Xander, are like in the heat of the moment, it's such a weird dichotomy, because he has an entire history with her that's much longer than her memory, and it's filled with great moments and betrayed moments and like moments of lust and uncertainty. And this is her first time falling for him. And if he's only liking her because he's been bewitched or there's been a spell put on him to like her, what does that mean for what she feels for him? I don't know. We've discovered how she plays into all of this situation. Two gods are at war with each other. And so she is being manipulated from all angles by so many people, but there's also two gods manipulating her as well to fulfill whatever vision they have for the world. So Romeria is literally like a pawn, and being a pawn in the game of gods never works out. And so, yeah, I will come back when I'm done. We have finished 5 stars. Five freaking stars. I had such a fun time with this book. Where we left these characters, like, we did get a significant more amount of romance towards the end. So again, it's still a very slow burning romance. But during the time that we weren't getting romance, we were getting immaculate world building, and I'm so excited to see what's going to happen in book 2 now that we have completely set up the world and our characters are in the throes of the plot. And there was so much scheming in this book. So many people were playing Romeria in so many ways. Like, it was a massive gangbang how people were playing her left and right, and still continue to play her. So in comparison to Guild, which is another fantasy romance that I highly enjoyed, Guild is more character development and romance. This one is definitely world building and plot heavy, and I feel like the romance is still going to be tumultuous in book 2, but I'm looking forward to a day where our characters can finally be together without so many people manipulating them in between. Thanks for watching this video. If you made it to the end, please leave a fire emoji, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.